amazing day. And there's more to come. Remember a tribute from Stevie Wonder, James Taylor, Sheryl Crow, and Lettucey, along with Ray Chew Live. Thank you all very much. It's been an honor to be with you this morning. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as Morning Joy concludes, we welcome you to the official dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial.
Go stage.
Please rise for the presentation of the colors and remain standing for the singing of the national anthem by a star of International Concert Productions' Three Mo Divas, Ms. Nova Nelson, followed by a very special rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing.
In front of RFK Stadium. And we said no. Dr. King deserves to be in the pantheon with everyone else. He changed not just this country, but indeed the world. Absolutely. He needs to be right there in the middle.
Well, Harry Johnson, of course, was taking place on the stage right now. They're about to sing the national anthem. That, of course, is significant, so we want to go ahead and take a listen to that. Great job there. I want to get a final comment from Harry. Harry, first of all, this is a 4-acre setting here, and so for the folks at home who decide to come here, what else is here? You got a bookstore. What will they see when they come here?
What they will see, they will walk through what we call the Mountain of Despair. 2 large boulders of granite.
Right.
Walk through the plaza area, crescent-shaped wall, 14 quotations of Dr. King on those walls, and then walk on and see Dr. King on a 30-foot tall piece of stone called the Stone of Hope.
All right, it is absolutely phenomenal. Harry, we certainly appreciate it, man. Great work. We still got a little money to raise, right?
$3 million.
$3 million, so they want to give.
Roland got that. He'll take care of that.
So anybody at home who want to give, where do they go?
They go to 1-800 for the dream, 1-800 for the dream.
All right then, Harry Johnson, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you all.
All right, and right now, of course, they are singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. All right, folks, there's much more ahead on TV1's special live coverage of the Martin Luther King National Memorial dedication. Stay tuned right here on TV1. Up next, Cicely Tyson. welcome back to TV1's special live coverage of the official dedication of Martin Luther King's National Monument. Right now, they are playing a video of Lift Every Voice and Sing. This is a phenomenal video that actually debuted at the Black Church Ball at President Barack Obama's inauguration. I emceed that. I want you to take a listen, watch this, folks. This is a phenomenal, phenomenal video. I'll tell you, Joe, when that video, when I first saw that, the exact same reaction. I always get tears watching that video because the entire, of course, song, they play all the verses. It's a compilation of all these photos and the historic images that led us to this very point.
And your tears are the same tears that James Weldon Johnson had when he finished writing Lift Every Voice. He broke down in tears standing there in Jacksonville, Florida, looking out over there. And that's right.
Every time I see that, I love it.
That's right.
That was what did it.
That's why it's powerful.
Well,
It's powerful.
I have that on my iPod, and sometimes when stuff get a little rough, I'll actually watch that just to remind yourselves. Folks, we are joined by a very special guest, a phenomenal woman, a gorgeous woman. Welcome to our TV1 set, Cicely Tice.
Thank you, Roland and Joe.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm here.
That's always a good thing.
That's all I need to know. Listen,
Your
the
perspective.
other night
Yes.
when we were celebrating Reverend Lowry, Vernon Jordan.
His 90th birthday in Atlanta last Sunday.
That's right. Vernon Jordan, when it was his turn to speak, said, as a lawyer, I have to give you advice. When you wake up in the morning without pain, you're dead.
That's a good point. Ms. Tyson, I got to ask you, this monument, this dedication, your reflections on Dr. King and this amazing movement.
Very difficult to define, primarily because it was so monumental. I look at the fact that this was scheduled initially on an earlier date, and Irene dispelled it. I have yet to feel comfortable about what happened when the following day was such a glorious day like today. And my mother had a saying about things like this: man appoints, but God disappoints. And my feelings are that that was not Dr. Martin Luther King. This is closer to being him. He wasn't a man about fanfare. He was a man about doing. And so I'm comfortable about being here because I think that this was closer to who he was than that might have been.
Can I ask the question, your visceral reaction when you actually saw the monument?
I haven't seen it yet.
You have not seen it?
No, I have not seen it yet.
So this will be your first
This
time
will
actually
be,
laying
and
eyes
I'm
on it.
sure it will render me breathless.
They gave voice to women like my mother, who guarded her children fiercely.
When you think about
Never told her daughters
this
to do
generation,
something they could not do.
and folks know Dr. King through newsreels, through books and things of that nature, do you think people really understand the measure of this man as opposed to a few speeches?
I doubt very seriously that anyone will ever understand the depth and the measure of the man. I think for the future generation, for the younger generation, it is important, the monument, because they have something that's tangible aside from being taught who he was, reading about who he was, hearing about who he was. They can come and look at this statue and form a closer reality to the man. So in that respect, I think it's very important.
Got to ask a final question.
Yes.
The movie, King,
Yes.
you played Mrs. Coretta Scott
Yes,
King.
I did.
Look, we're talking about Dr. King, but please share a few words about the woman who stood by his side and kept his legacy alive.
Well,
That made the King holiday a reality.
certainly she was very important to me and very generous with her time. I moved in with the family just so that I could be there, feel them, smell them, and taste them. And I went to say Mountaintop the other after, yes.
Samuel L. Jackson's playing
Yes.
MLK in Broadway.
Yes, with Angela
Angela
Bassett. And he brought a carnation out, and he proceeded to talk about that carnation. One of the most moving experiences that I had with Coretta was the fact that he called her the day before, and he said, "I sent you some flowers." And she said, "I have not received them." Then there was a knock on the door, and she said, "Wait, this may be them." And surely enough, it was. And she looked at them and she said to him, "They're not real flowers, they're fake flowers." He said, "I wanted you to have something that would last." And she pointed them out to me. She had them in a credenza glass, a bowl of red carnations. Okay. And to me, I remember that about her and he, the last moments that they had together.
Amazing. Cicely Tyson, always a pleasure. Thank you so very much for being
Thank
with
you,
us.
Roland.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Good to
Folks,
see you.
We'll have to
when we
have
come
the
back,
cameras on you.
the King family speaks. Stay with us. You're watching TV1's live special coverage of the Martin Luther King National Memorial Dedication.
Mayor of the District of Columbia.
Welcome back to TV1's special live coverage of the Martin Luther King Memorial Dedication, Part 2. As you know, Hurricane Irene postponed the original dedication. This event is open to the public and the crowd is certainly thick. Speaking right now is Washington, D.C. Mayor Vincent Gray. Now in a few minutes, the King family members, Christine Ferris King, his sister, Dr. King's last surviving sibling, as well as the children of Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, Bernice King, will address the crowd. Also, Julian Bond, one of Dr. King's former students at Morehouse College and a founding member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, is coming to the stage soon to share his memories of Dr. King and introduce the King family. So before we do that, though, we want to give you a sense of some of the interviews that we did with some ministers at the dedication week of activities that took place in late August.
I'm Dr. James Edward King, Land of Promise, and I'm excited to be a part of this wonderful celebration honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a prophet, a priest who ultimately changed the nomenclature of this entire country, the entire world. And I'm excited because of this great event. And I speak to my sons, James Edward and John Alexander, quoting this marvelous words that falls from the prophets of ancient, as Dr. Martin Luther King uttered. We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. And here today, I see water and I see a stream flowing with love and a community that's together, one nation under God. Thank you so much.
Julian Bond is now speaking. He and I, Roland, served on the national board together for 14 years.
NAACP.
I actually ran against him for chairman. But I met Julian when I
Right.
was 19 years old. Let's go to listen to Julian
right.
Bond, who was a student of Dr. Martin Luther King
indeed.
at Morehouse.
Presence in our neighborhood. I was not far from him on the Washington Mall on that magic day in August when he delivered his famous speech. It's hard now to summarize all that he meant to us when he was alive and how great our loss is now upon his death. The true measure of any man is how his message continues on after he's passed from the scene. We have very recent proof that Martin Luther King meets that standard. Tawakkol Karman, this year's 32-year-old Yemeni winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, said just last week, "Martin Luther King inspired me, most because he sought change peacefully. Also Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, but really to the largest extent is Martin Luther King. We try to use change using the same methods." King's message resonates in faraway Yemen and everywhere around the world, just as it stirred millions of us and continues to do so today. Since he died, a constant question I've received whenever a racial advance occurred was, what would Dr. King have said about this? What would he say when America elected its first black president? Would he think that this achievement was a confirmation of his dream? Would he say that these things would not have happened if he had not lived? I've always felt he'd be pleased whenever any element of racial progress occurred, but he wouldn't think that nirvana had come, and he wouldn't try to claim credit for everything. And this is what I think he would want us to say today, what he said at his last sermon. He'd say, "I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. And I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say I was a drum major, say I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. Racial equality, economic justice, world peace, those were the themes that occupied Dr. King's life. They've occupied the lives of his family members, 3 of whom are with us today. Here to tell us of their father and brother are Dr. King's eldest son, Martin Luther King III, daughter and youngest child, Reverend Bernice King, and Dr. Christine King Ferris, Martin Luther King's sister, the last surviving member of that generation of the family. Now let us welcome Dr. Christine King Ferris.
Of course, Joe, last surviving sibling of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
And the fact that we heard Julian Bond, another fact that a lot of people don't know, Martin Luther King married Julian Bond and his first wife. That's that's how close they were at Atlanta. And Julian has gone on, as I mentioned, I first met him when I was 19. Mm-hmm. We always talk about Barack Obama and his presidency, but we forget, how did Julian Bond become famous? Remember, it was 1968, the convention, and at the Democratic Convention, and he was nominated, I think, for vice president, too young.
Absolutely. Right now, I'm going to go to Dr. King's sister, who's speaking right now.
I stand before you today as the person who knew Martin Luther King Jr. longer than anyone now alive. In fact, I was there in our home the day that he was born, on January 15, 1929. He was my little brother, and I watched him grow and develop into a man who was destined for a very special kind of greatness. It's been quite a journey from that cold January day, more than 82 years ago, on down to today, when I first laid my eyes on my baby brother. Now I'm standing here alongside an African-American president at the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial on the National Mall. During my life, I witnessed a baby become a great hero to humanity, who provides hope and inspiration for freedom-loving people everywhere. So I just want to say to all the young people coming up, great dreams can come true, and America is a place where you can make it happen. And I know that our president will agree with me on this. It wasn't far from here where my brother Martin told America about his great dream for our country on this day 48 years ago, the dream of justice, equality, and brotherhood he shared with us on that sweltering August afternoon. It's really the heart and soul of the American dream. It's what this country must always be about, so we can light the way forward to a new era of peace and prosperity for all people in all nations. And I remember another lovely afternoon in 1983 when another president of the United States signed into law a bill to name my brother's birthday a federal holiday. That, too, was a day of hope and healing. I don't think my brother's legacy could get much larger. But I was wrong, because here I am overjoyed and humbled to see this great day when my brother Martin takes his symbolic place on the National Mall. On this National Mall near America's greatest presidents, including Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, and Franklin Roosevelt. This is just overwhelming. My brother was never one to seek great honors. In fact, he was self-effacing, and he was amazed and humbled to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace back in 1964. I want to thank the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity for having the vision, commitment, and determination to conceive this project and to see it through. By honoring Martin Luther King Jr. with such a wonderful statue on the National Mall, you have ensured that his legacy will provide a source of inspiration for people from all over the world for generations to come. My brother was an Alpha himself, and he was deeply proud of his fraternity brothers when they came to the aid of our nonviolent freedom struggle again and again with urgently needed contributions and volunteer support. And now, against all odds, you have built this beautiful monument which brings honor to our country and hope to coming generations. And in closing, I want to thank each of you for joining us today. Your presence is also an affirmation of my brother's legacy and the great blessings of diversity in America. Let this wonderful day mark another step toward the fulfillment of the dream, and let all hearts be joined together as we move forward into the future, united and determined to create the beloved community in America and throughout the world. I thank you.
That is Christine King Ferris, the sister of Dr. King. And Joe, she said, when I first laid eyes on my baby brother in January,
and
when he was born.
And to be still alive as the oldest, to be able to give us that personal understanding of what he was like. I mean, and when you guys pan to the monument, I got to tell you, I was thinking about my 5-year-old grandson. His kindergarten class came to see the monument, and the teacher asked him to read each of the quotes. And here I am thinking, my God, you know, two generations or one generation removed.
Well, certainly amazing.
And so here's a new generation.
And right now speaking, Dr. King's daughter, Bernice King.
Right.
Mrs. Christine King Farris. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today as we dedicate this monument to a man of inspiring vision and transformative action, my father, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It's been a long time coming. The vision of my father's fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, to build a monument, the establishment of a King Memorial Foundation led by Mr. Harry Johnson and 11 staff persons, an act of Congress, 10 years of fundraising and a lot of hard work, an earthquake and a hurricane, but today we are here. And thank God we are here. It is a great time of celebration, and the entire King family is proud to witness this day. I am especially proud to stand here as one of the 4 children to whom my father referred to as he resounded the American dream that one day we would live in a nation where we would not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Today represents another milestone in the life of America. This is a day that all Americans can be proud of. And may I remind you that this is not just a celebration for African Americans, but for Americans and citizens around this world. And no doubt, today the world celebrates with us. Today, our nation acknowledges its growth again, for this memorial represents a stair step beyond its laws of segregation. It symbolizes that a black preacher, prophet from the South, effected a social change that helped to redeem the soul of America. And I want to express my gratitude to each person, each organization, each corporation, each entity that contributed to what we see here today, from its conception to its realization. However, we would be remiss if we did not also recognize and honor the life and legacy of my mother, Mrs. Coretta Scott King. For left after the assassination of my father to raise us 4 children, my mother also, with her dedicated and tireless efforts, raised a nation in our father's teachings and values. It was vitally important for her that his life, words, and principles become institutionalized. And so she spearheaded the effort, even as a grieving widow, to establish the King Center in Atlanta as the official living memorial to Martin Luther King Jr., and then went on to champion a national holiday commemorating our father's birthday and a host of other efforts. So in many respects, she paved the way and made it possible for a man who was the most hated man in America in 1968 to now be one of the most revered and loved men in the world, so that we might be able to build a monument in his honor. Thank you, Mama, for your dedication. Thank you, Mama, for your sacrifice. And we, as your children, are glad that we were able to share our parents with the world so that we could be in a better place. But she did not just institutionalize his words, his principles, so that we could only remember him, but also so we could be propelled into action utilizing his philosophy and strategies of nonviolence. It's no accident that the official dedication could not occur on August 28th, the anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. Although fully powerful, prophetic, and passionate, and one of the most well-known speeches around this world, could it be perhaps that the dedication not taking place on the anniversary of that great speech is indicative of God wanting us to move forward to look at the rest of King? That as we survey the current events and global cries for an alleviation of poverty and economic oppression, we are being pulled from the familiar place and the comfort place of I Have a Dream to focusing on another aspect of Dr. King's life. Perhaps the postponement was a divine interruption to remind us of the King that moved us beyond the dream of racial justice to the action and work of economic justice. Perhaps God wanted to remind us that 43 years ago, when our father was taken from us, that he was in the midst of starting a poor people's campaign, where he was galvanizing poor people from all walks of life to converge on this nation's capital and stay here and occupy this place until there was change in the economic system and a better distribution of wealth. Perhaps God wanted us to move beyond the dream into action, and maybe we were unable to dedicate this monument on August 28th just because of that. And he's saying to us, it's time to readjust. In fact, over 43 years ago, he told us that we must become maladjusted to certain social ills. We should never adjust to the 1% controlling more than 40% of the wealth. We should never adjust to an unprecedented number of people being unemployed. We should never adjust to any person being without health care because they cannot afford it. We should never adjust to an increase of people moving into poverty. We should never adjust to violence of any form, bullying or being bullied. We should never adjust to policies and practices that profile people because of their color, their ethnicity, or their nation of origin. We should never adjust to a judicial system that allows us to take a life when guilt is yet in question. And so, as we dedicate this monument, I can hear my father saying that oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. As we dedicate this monument, I hear my father saying, what we are seeing now all across the streets of America and the world is a freedom explosion. The deep rumbling of discontent that we hear today is the thunder of disinherited masses rising from the dungeons of oppression to the bright hills of freedom. I hear my father saying, as we protest, though, we must conduct ourselves on a higher plane of dignity and discipline. I hear my father saying, we must have a radical revolution of values and a reordering of our priorities in this nation. I hear my father saying, as we dedicate this monument, we must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. I hear my father saying, one of the great liabilities of our history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society, he said, has its protectors of the status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. But today, he said, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. These words, dripping with truth and conviction, as much now as they were when originally spoken, could, if we allow them, propel us into action. Action that responds to the discontent of the disinherited, conveying that we stand together in seeking a distributed inheritance for all. Action that reflects our commitment to not allowing a focus on gaining things to deter us from compassionately engaging people. Action that reverberates with a common desire for the manifestation of freedom. Action that resonates with the discontented masses, supporting social change and demonstrating that we are alert during this time of economic revolution. And so I say in closing, let us walk together, children, and not get weary. Let us work together, children, and not get weary. Let us struggle together, children, and not get weary. Let us hold on together, children, and not get weary. Let us fuss, fight, but get over it together, children, and not get weary. But most of all, we must pray together, children, or we will get weary. And one day, we'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are all free at last. God bless you.
That was the daughter of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Bernice King. Joe, I think it's safe to say somebody's the preacher in the family.
I was going to just say that. Who's the preacher in the family? Clearly, and you could hear his cadence and all the speeches that she borrowed from her father. She wrapped them well together. But let me say something else real quick, because I know the third is coming up.
With his daughter.
And that is Betty Shabazz, Merle Everett Williams, Coretta Scott King, to invoke the women and the mothers of the civil rights movement. We need to understand they were very special people.
Absolutely.
Too.
And women played a huge part. Here's MLK III and his daughter, Yolanda, named after the elder sibling in the King family.
Many in our nation would say is the Sabbath day. To each and every dignitary here, and I would say that's everybody, but to especially Brother Harry Johnson and his staff for the tireless work to make this memorial a reality, we first say thank you. Also to the Martin Luther King Foundation Board and its chair, to each and every contributor, every corporation, but perhaps most of all to the masses of Americans who chose to contribute to this effort that would not be here but by the contributions of men and women and families. So we thank each of you and every one of you. On behalf of my wife, Andrea, and our daughter, Yolanda Renee, we say thank you. Today we've come to participate in this unveiling ceremony to my father and celebrate his legacy. Let us not forget that he paid the ultimate price for our civil rights. He was a champion of human rights and social justice for all people, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or nationality. We must stand up for social and economic justice. 48 years ago, my father stood in this vicinity, in the shadows of the Lincoln Memorial, and gave a speech that was to resonate around the world. He said that he had a dream that with faith in ourselves and in our country, we will be able to hew out of a mountain of despair a stone of hope. That with faith, we would be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood and sisterhood. That with faith, we would be able to work together, stand up for freedom together, knowing that one day we would all be free. I repeat his words because I believe that it's important to emphasize that while it's great to have this memorial to his memory, and it's great to have a national holiday, and it's great to have streets and schools and hospitals named in his honor all over our nation and world, it is also important to not place too much emphasis on Martin Luther King, the idol, but not enough emphasis on the ideals of Martin Luther King Jr. So while we commemorate his memory today with this great memorial, let us not confuse nor forget what he stood for and died for. The young people around this nation organizing are very interesting, but let us not forget the ideals he gave up his life for: love, peace, equality, jobs, education, nonviolence, decent housing, and an end to war. The young people of the Occupy movement all over this country and throughout the world are seeking justice. Justice for the employed searching for months for jobs and those among them having given up in despair. Justice for working class people barely making it. Justice for middle class folks who are unable to pay their mortgages. Justice for elders terrified that they're losing the value of their savings and their health care. Justice for the young people who graduate from college, are unemployed and burdened by student loans they cannot repay. Justice for everyone who are simply asking the wealthy and corporations to pay their fair share. You see, sometimes we get caught up in the brand of my father, but we forget to focus on the beliefs of my father. We must stand up for social and economic justice. We as a people in this country have lost our love force, our true force. As a matter of fact, you can make this argument that we have ultimately lost our souls. We've lost our souls. When I see that a 49-year-old black man, James Craig Anderson, was brutally murdered in Mississippi, not in 1963, but in June of 2011. We've lost our souls when I see children bullying other children and young teenagers killing each other. We've lost our souls when prisons are a growth industry, as the prisons are filled every day with more people than any other industrialized nation. There are more black and brown folks in prison than in college. That must change. We've lost our souls when the United States Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, decided in Brown versus the Entertainment Merchants Association to strike down a state law that regulates the sale of violent video games to children. We've lost our souls when 30 years of failed public policy have reduced regressive tax breaks for the rich while breaking the backs of the poor. Unions and the middle class sending the country and world into an economic crisis. We've lost our souls when we continue to fight two wars that have cost us $3 trillion and cost thousands of American lives, Iraqi lives, Afghani lives, and others. We must stand up for social and economic justice. I know we're here to celebrate the life of my father and commemorate my father, but we need to try to live like him, to love like him, and to care like him. Yes, my father had a dream. It was a dream, he said, that was deeply embedded in the American dream. The problem is the American dream of 50 years ago was 2 cars, a house, 2 kids, and a dog named Spot has turned into a nightmare for millions. For millions of Americans, there is no house because they have no jobs and therefore can't give their kids the proper tools to prepare them for a better life than they had. So I submit that we need a new America dream, a dream of interconnectedness, a dream of mutual purpose, a dream of caring and being responsible for each other. We need to live up to the promise sketched out into that majestically held and that statue that we call the Statue of America. which says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." We need to understand that none of us are free until all of us can be free. We need to have a new spirit of cooperation in this country based on love, respect, and sensitivity to the least of these among us. That is what my father wanted for this country. And so while I am proud of this great memorial to my father, I hope it will serve as a catalyst for us to adopt his ideals and beliefs, a renewal of decency, sensitivity, and love. Love he so often talked about. We must stand up for that justice, because now is the time for all humankind. And so, America, this is our chance. This is our opportunity to show the world of our greatness, to throw off the shackles of all of the conservative policies that exclude masses of people. We must finally get rid of racism. Today, at this great moment in our collective history, I ask you to join with me as the head of the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change to stand up for justice and social unrest. Everywhere, we must build a brighter day for everyone and create the opportunity for people to once again acquire wealth. And therefore, we will ultimately triumph over those triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism that my father championed often. Let us embrace Dad's legacy. Let us celebrate Dad's life. But more importantly, let us live as Dr. King envisioned when he described how all of our destinies are tied together. We are linked together. I can't be what I ought to be until you're what you ought to be. And you can't be what you ought to be until I'm what I ought to be, because our destinies are tied together, is what he said. And so, America, today let us meet the challenge to finally embrace and become what we know we must become, and that is the beloved community. So no matter how far we have to go, and we probably do have a long way to go, it may get worse before it gets better. Do not get any ways tired. Do not get any ways tired, because we have truly come much too far from where we started. You see, nobody ever told any of us that our roads would be easy, but I know our God did not bring any of us this far to leave us. Thank you so much, and God bless each and every one of you always.
That was Martin Luther King III, the son of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. Folks, stay with us. You're watching TV1 special live coverage, the dedication of Martin Luther King's National Memorial. Back in a moment. Dr. King, like any good leader, knows he was only as strong as the people who supported him, and he was blessed to have some powerful and committed supporters. People like the Reverend Joseph Lowery, considered to be the dean of the Civil Rights Movement, Congressman John Lewis, one of the speakers of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and also Ambassador Andrew Young, the former mayor of Atlanta, and one of the chief lieutenants of Dr. King. They're all here to share their memories of the early years of the Civil Rights Movement. Also, former CBS anchor and journalist Dan Rather will also be sharing his thoughts. Right now, of course, Mary, they're finished performing, and we're joined right now by Cynthia Tucker, Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, and also journalist George Curry, both of them regulars on Washington Watch. I got to ask this, Cynthia and George. We've heard from Bernice King, MLK III, Yolanda King, of course, the oldest child. She passed away. But we can't help but notice Dexter King is not here.
Dexter is not here. You know, as editorial writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for many, many years, I kept a close eye on the King family. And sadly, I have to report that there is some dysfunction among the children. They have sued each other in court. And so, sadly, this is an extremely important day for the Kings, and it's very sad to note that Dexter isn't here. And I'm a little surprised, even given the dysfunction that has gone on among the children.
Well, you know, George, and look, at the end of the day, some folks say, hey, why would you bring it up? But look, you really have no choice because it speaks loudly not to be here.
Certainly, and there's no question about that. Also, I noticed a difference in those two speeches, those two kids. Bernice did not mention sexual orientation. Martin III did. That's no accident. I noticed that was very memorable.
And we also should point out that Yolanda, of course, isn't here because she passed away,
Exactly.
and I'm certain that she would have been here. As journalists, though, let's talk about Dr. King's relationship with the three of you who are outstanding journalists. What do you think his relationship would have been with today's media, the way that we have this division among conservatives and liberals?
Well, you know, he is a revered figure today, but let's not forget that he was not a revered figure, broadly speaking, in his lifetime.
Precisely.
He was well treated usually during interviews, particularly with the big networks and the big newspapers. But certainly there were many Southern journalists who despised him, who wrote very ugly, hateful things about him during his lifetime. But he was always so skilled at handling even his critics. I could see him going on to Fox News today and handling Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity with humor, with courage, but with frankness. He was always frank, even with those who criticized him.
Now, George, I got to say, of course, that we're here broadcasting this on TV One, and that was a very special relationship between the black press and Dr. King. He wrote a column for Ebony magazine, was offered in Jet. Of course, Lerone Bennett, the famed journalist at Morehouse with Dr. King. If it wasn't for the black press, that word would not have gotten out.
There's no question about it. And also, Dr. King had a respect for the black press. Now, let's go ahead and be honest. We're going to be honest. Some figures, many major figures now, they don't consider themselves a rival unless they are covered in the New York Times or the Washington Post or on the networks. They think about the black press only if they can't find anything else. Dr. King was always respectful for that relationship, and he spoke directly to his people.
And a lot of people don't realize the first African American to ever win a Pulitzer Prize, Ornetta Sleep Jr. for Ebony magazine. What people miss, of course, we all know that iconic photograph of I believe it was Yolanda. Was Yolanda or Bernice?
Bernice.
Bernice, who was on
the youngest,
laying on the lap of Coretta Scott King. Well, actually, the white photographers, they actually said we're not allowing any African Americans who in the press pool. And Bennett went to Coretta Scott King the night before the funeral and said they are not going to allow the black press in the pool. And she said, if there are no black photographers, there will be no photographers allowed in the funeral. And that's how he got to be in the pool.
This is what you got to understand. Look, I'm 64 years old. I could get a job at Sports Illustrated. At the time, I could get a job in my hometown newspaper in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Not only were the images bad, they did not hire us. And the black press was all you had, Jose.
Right now, speaking is Dan Rather, and one of the reasons I want to talk about the importance of media, this movement, Dr. King also was a coming of age for many white journalists because they got a real understanding of what was taking place on the ground in these southern states.
There are so many major white journalists, names that all of us would recognize, both on network news and at big newspapers like the New York Times, who made their reputations covering the civil rights movement. Because as George just noted, lots of the major newspapers and networks weren't hiring black journalists at the time.
And also, it was dangerous for black journalists because there was a point when they were being beaten.
Well, absolutely, because those who were with the black press often were beaten, shot. You know, you were just the press. If you were black, that didn't give you any cover.
And also, if you were white press were often beaten and considered sympathetic, particularly if they were from the North. And one other aspect, I'm sorry, Judge, I was just going to bring up about history. There would not have been a photograph of Dr. Martin Luther King receiving the Nobel Peace Prize if it had not been for Johnson publication. No one in major mainstream media sent a photographer or reporter.
The point I was going to make, Joe, is that let's not understand that the media was complicit with the FBI in discrediting Dr. King.
Yes.
And they would feed them information, and they would run it. In fact, when Dr. King was assassinated, the reason he got moved to another hotel, he was staying in the White Holiday Inn Hotel. The FBI sent out information saying, oh, look at this hypocrite. He should be over there in the black hotel. He's staying in the white hotel, and he moved and changed his hotel, and that's where he was assassinated.
One of the reasons I think it's so important to talk about these things is because, again, people really don't want to understand the history. And speaking of history, coming to the stage right now is Joseph Lowry, last week in Atlanta, celebrating his 90th birthday. And suffice to say, he is going to have something interesting, no doubt. At the Congressional Black Caucus, when he was at the foundation dinner, he received an award. He said, I'll say what I got to say for the campaign trail. And so there'll be no doubt that he has something significant to say in a moment. But right now is Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Senior.
I'm honored to be a part of this ceremony as we etch in stone the members of Dr. King. I want to thank Congressman John Conyers, who 3 days after his assassination put forth the bill, for Stevie Wonder who popularized it in song, Ronald Reagan who signed the bill, the Air Force who helped to erect the monument. For all of them, we owe a very special round of applause. Put your hands together, won't you? I was blessed to be a part of his corps of disciples who worked, organized, marched, and prayed with him. Here we are today, 132 miles from Jamestown, where the slave ships landed. 400-year journey for 132 miles. I remember my last birthday with Dr. King, January 15, 1968. We spent that day planning a Poor People's Campaign, a march on Washington, a Poor People's Campaign to occupy the mall. We were willing to engage in civil disobedience, to go to jail and do whatever was necessary in the nation's capital to get the attention of the government to shift from a war in Vietnam, killing and being killed, to a war on poverty at home, healing and being healed. In his last Sunday morning, a sermon delivered at the Washington National Cathedral 4 days before his assassination, Dr. King said that we're coming to Washington to demand that the government address itself on the problem of poverty. Answering the rhetorical question of why such a gesture was necessary, Dr. King declared that it is our experience that the nation doesn't move around questions of genuine equality for the poor and for the black people until it is confronted massively and dramatically in terms of direct action. The image of confrontational King may not be pleasing to those who seek to wash the blood stains from history, but is useful to those who value the truth of King's life more than the myth of the man. Dr. King argued that racial justice is not enough in a burning house when you are living with recycled poverty and pain. Today I'm convinced he would be appreciative of this monument, but sad. Sad today because Congress is in rebellion and states and cities are facing intense pain. Maybe only the 14th Amendment can bail us out, that Congress will not. Sad because of too much concentrated wealth, subsidized and born of government protection, too much poverty born of government neglect, too many expensive wars, too many children killing children, too many jobs leaving, and too much drugs coming. We can end malnutrition now. We can forgive student loan debt right now. Dr. King would be sad that America had a redemptive moment of history, of historic proportions in 2008, electing President Barack Obama. And yet that redemption has been met with unrelenting retribution, retaliation, venom, and unprecedented opposition. The many seem willing to sink the ship, just to destroy the captain. We must be better than that. Like Lyndon Baines Johnson's War on Poverty, which must be restored, and the Great Society, Dr. King wouldn't settle for shifting the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. He would want to deal with those in the hull of the ship, to plug the holes to stop the water from coming in. 43 years after Dr. King planned an occupation on this same spot, he would say to the occupiers in Wall Street, the movement has gone global. You are the children and offspring of Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign and Resurrection City, the occupied Wall Street in 2008 and 2011, and now 43 years after 2008. In that legacy, keep protesting, remain nonviolent, stay disciplined, stay focused. Don't just fortify the system, restructure it. March on for an even playing field, public rules, clear goals, fair referees, and transparency. March on to fight racial injustice and economic inequality, and fight for economic and racial justice. We're all God's children with a royal bloodline. We all matter. So the King would say, you must use the rights earned through the sacrifice and blood of the martyrs. You must use your minds and bodies as living sacrifices. You must use your vote. Our path to legislation, litigation, and laws that protect the vulnerable. Use your love building coalitions. Remain focused on being the rope of hope for those in the hull of the ship, the 99%. So the King argued that leadership at its best was not meant to follow opinion polls. It was meant to mold public opinion. Do not what is convenient or popular, do what is right. Don't be corrupted or compromise principles, and stay true to your vision. For a seasoned truth crushed to the earth will stay there, but it will rise again. We fall down sometime, but we get up again and again, because the ground is no place for a champion. Job says, though you slay me, I realize my worst fears, yet I will get up again because I trust in God. I know my Redeemer lives. Victory is certain. Keep hope alive.
That was Reverend Jesse Jackson, Sr.
And the question that I have listening to Jesse Jackson and the other speakers, it's very political. I can hear people now, Fox, saying, wait a minute, I thought this is supposed to be a dedication. People are being very, very political. John Lewis is getting ready to come up.
I thought that the same thing. I think you're right.
And we'll talk about that.
And obviously, Congress is coming up, so it's political.
Well, here comes the congressman, right?
Beautiful day. First, I want to thank Harry Johnson, Sr., President and CEO of the Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation. His board of directors, Dana Kurtz, his executive director, and his entire staff. I want to thank the men of Alpha Phi Alpha, corporate donors, and average citizens whose faith made this dream come true. Thank you for building a monument to peace, to love, and nonviolent resistance on the front yard of America, to symbolize the cornerstone of our true democracy. It was 48 long years ago when thousands of us, yearning for justice and freedom, stood a short distance from here in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial. Many of us were fresh from the jails of a stone hard south of the front line of the struggle for human dignity in America. We gathered there in peace with our hearts in our hands, hoping to see some sign that our cries would be heard through the cold marble walls of this distant capital. Martin Luther King Jr., this man, this brother, this citizen of America, this citizen of the world, was number 10 in the program lineup. I was number 6. Of those who spoke that day, I'm the only one still around. Dr. King was our leader. He never, ever asked us to do anything that he would not do. He was arrested, jailed, beaten, and constantly harassed. His home was bombed. He was stabbed. He suffered the slings and arrows of hate in a grassroots struggle to prove that love had eternal power to overcome the limitation of hate. Had it not been for the philosophy of peace, the philosophy of nonviolence that he preached, and his insistence on the nonviolent resistance based on brotherly love, this would be a different nation. We would be living in a different place today. But Martin Luther King Jr. must be looked upon as one of the founding fathers of the new America. But this man, this one man, not only freed a people, but he liberated a nation. We are here, all of us, black and white, Latino, Asian American, and Native American. We're here because this one man did what presidents have been unable to do. He ended what the Civil War could not finish. He challenged the most powerful nation on earth to meet its moral obligation to look out for his people, look out for those who have been left out and left behind. This doctor, this preacher, this man from Atlanta, Georgia, taught us how to love. He told us to lay down the burden of hate, but hate was too heavy a burden to bear. Martin Luther King Jr. Just think a few short years ago when we came to Washington 48 years ago. We had signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. Those signs are gone and they will not return. The only place our children will see those signs will be in a book, in a museum, on a video. And I hear too many people saying now, 48 years later, that nothing has changed. Come and walk in my shoes. Dr. King is telling you that we have changed, that we are better people, we're a better nation. Just think a few short years ago when Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, we could not register to vote in many parts of the Deep South. We had to pass a so-called literacy test. We were asked to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap, count the number of jelly beans in a jar. But because of the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and the work of hundreds and thousands and millions of people, because of the leadership of President Kennedy and President Lyndon Johnson, we live in a different place. People ask me over and over again, whether the election of Barack Obama is a fulfillment of Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. I only said no, it's just a down payment. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Too many people have been left out and left behind. Let's use this occasion to go out and finish the task. Do what we must do to create a better world, to create a more perfect union. Hang in there. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't give out. Keep your faith. Keep your eyes on the prize and walk with the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you very much.
Congressman John Lewis, the last surviving speaker of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom.
And we forget that John Lewis's speech in 1963, you remember, had to be toned down.
George and I were just talking about that. You know, he is, needless to say, John Lewis is very widely respected and not seen as a bomb thrower, but his speech was toned down.
Former Atlanta Mayor, Ambassador Andrew Young.
But you think of Martin Luther King as a giant of a man, but the one complex he had was a complex about his height. He was really just 5'7", and he was always getting upset with tall people who looked down on him.
Now he's 30 feet tall, looking down on everybody. But he'd be the first to tell you that he didn't give his life for a statue. He gave his life for the least of these God's children. And in the middle of the struggle, when we began to work out the problems of militarism and the problems of politics and the dynamics of getting people elected, they changed the rules on us. They changed the rules, and the game is no longer just political. In fact, it's the economics that controls the politics. And people of Atlanta sent me to Congress, and I was there at the scene of the crime when they began to break up an economic order that had been started by Franklin Roosevelt in 1944. In the end of '73, they changed it. And then a little later on, they changed something called Regulation Q. Listen to this now, because this is what puts you out of your house and why your mortgage isn't worth what you paid for it. They changed the rules in the Congress. And then the savings and loans went out of business because they left housing and started building casinos and resorts and everything else. When they went out of business, the commercial banks got into housing. They didn't know anything about housing. They started packaging mortgages in something called derivatives, and they sold them all around the world, and they weren't worth a damn. And then when they went out of business, they called for the government to bail them out. And that wasn't good enough, but there was a regulation called Glass-Steagall that kept commercial banks from messing in the business of investment banks. Republicans changed that. And now the thing is all messed up. The problem in banking and finance is we have too much integration. And nobody really knows what they're doing, and they're doing it in secret, and they're not using their minds, they're using their greedy behinds. Now in Atlanta, we tried to straighten that out a little bit. I'm not against Wall Street. I'm just saying we have to learn the rules and use it to our advantage. Maynard Jackson set up an airport. It's now cost us about $10 million after all of the rest of the mayors. We've had black mayors in Atlanta for 44 years. And we've tried to do things within the economy, and we've been able to generate jobs. The airport costs $10 billion, but it generates $30 billion every year and creates about 60,000 jobs. And Kasim Reed is now adding an international terminal that's probably going to add another 5,000 jobs. I'm saying the system works if you know how to work it. And Martin Luther King gave his life to end poverty. You're not going to end poverty by preaching. You're going to end poverty by learning some economics, by sending your children to school, by saving your money, by getting financially literate. And just like we won the battle of voting rights, we can win the battle of economic rights. And that's what Martin Luther King would have you do now. And the first step to that is to keep a president in office that basically has your interest at heart. And if we don't do that this year, God help us.
That was Ambassador Andrew Young.
Did we say it was getting political?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. George, real quick, your thoughts about his speech.
Well, got Joe Lauer. I'll defer to Joe Lauer any day.
I'm Pastor Lance C. Johnson, Sr. of the Revelation of Christ Church, the Rock Church in North Charleston, South Carolina. And this quote of Dr. King speaks to me because it talks about making a career of humanity, that we all are humanitarians by heart, and that what we do, everything that we do, should affect another human in a great and noble way. And I thank Dr. King for what he's done for this country and this nation and this world. He truly was a humanitarian. Only titles make us in the moment, but humanitarians make us for the world and eternity. Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in.
At the outset of our broadcast, you heard us talk to Harry Johnson, the president and CEO of the foundation responsible for making this monument a reality. But it all started with Alpha Phi Alpha some 28 years ago. And in the images you just saw, you saw Skip Mason, the current general president, helping escort President Barack Obama and his family around. So here's a piece on A-Phi-A and their importance in making this monument a reality.
I am very honored, I'm humbled that I serve as general president at a time as this. This has been a long time coming, 28 years. I was a college student when the idea was proposed, and to be with my brothers here and some of the living civil rights icons and soldiers who helped to make this movement possible, and to see this composing monument and memorial to Brother King is just awe-inspiring. We are honored that Martin Luther King Jr. chose Alpha. He could have chose some other ones, but he saw the light, and we are honored for that. But this is an incredible occasion, and to have the King family here, I think, is the icing on the cake. And that the weather is as beautiful as it is. It's just a blessing from God. And really what it says is that the monument started with Alpha, and it returned back for the dedication with the fraternity that created it.
And when you say it started with Alpha,
yes.
I mean, take our viewers through in terms of when did the idea originally start?
It was in 1983 when the five brothers decided that we need to do something for Brother King on the Mall. They went to Ozell Sutton, who was general president, and Ozell had marched with Brother King, was in the Lorraine Motel, and he presented it to the brothers and said, this is something that we need to do. And the brothers voted and adopted to support it. And each general president worked towards moving it forward, maneuvering through the pitfalls and politics of Congress, getting the bill passed, getting the site selected.
And of course, this wasn't the original site that they voted on.
Actually, the original site was located over near the RFK Stadium. And Alpha said resoundingly, no way. And so this was the last choice piece of property on the mall that a memorial could be built, and we could not have asked for a better location to place our brother here for the ages.
O Lord, may the true spirit of eternity rule our hearts, guide our thoughts, and control our lives, so that we can come to believe, serve us all. Amen.
All right, folks, we're back live at the MLK dedication. You see the massive crowd gathered here. Just a few moments ago, President Obama and the First Lady, they both came to the stage. I was going to get a shout out of that right now. Skip Mason, the General President, we just heard from him, is about to give his words to the crowd here. But earlier, while we were talking also in a commercial break, poet Nikki Giovanni, she addressed this crowd. So here's what she had to say to the audience a little bit earlier.
Yes, fraternity brothers, it is with great pride
In the spirit
and honor that I
of Martin. This is a sacred poem. Blood has been shed to consecrate it. Wash your hands, remove your shoes, bow your head. I have a dream. That was a magical time. Hi-ho, silver away. Oh, Cisco, oh, Pancho, here I come to save the day. I want the world to see what they did to my son. No, no, no. I'm not going to move. If we are wrong, then the Constitution of the United States is wrong. Montgomery, Birmingham, Selma, 4 little girls, constant threat, constant harassment, constant fear. SCLC, Ralph and Martin, Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, Ed Sullivan. How long? Not long.
But what, Mr. Thoreau said to Mr. Emerson, are you doing out? This is a letter from Birmingham City Jail. This is a eulogy for Albany. This is a water hose for Anniston. This is a thank you to Diane Nash. This is a flag for James Farmer. This is a how can I make it without you to Ella Baker. This is for the red clay of Georgia that yielded black men of courage, black men of vision, black men of hopes, bent over cotton and sweet potatoes or pool tables and baseball diamonds, playing for a chance to live free and breathe easy and have enough money to take care of the folks they love. This is why we can't wait. That swirling Mississippi wind, the Alabama pine, that Tennessee dust, defiling the clothes the women washed. Those hot winds the lemonade couldn't cool, that let the women know we too must overcome. This is for Fannie Lou Hamer, Joanne Robinson, Septima Clark, Daisy Bates, all the women who said, baby, 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 I know you didn't mean to lose your job. I know you didn't mean to gamble the rent money. I know you didn't mean to hit me. I know the Lord is gonna make a way. I know I'm leaning on the everlasting arms. How much pressure does the earth exert on carbon to make a diamond? How long does the soil push against the flesh, molding, molding, molding the moan that becomes a cry that bursts forth crystalline, unbreakable, priceless, incomparable Martin? I made my vow to the Lord that I never would turn back. How much pressure do the sins of the world press against the heart of a man who becomes the voice of his people? He should have had a tattoo, you know, freedom now or something like that. Should have braided his hair, carried his full cue in a mahogany case, wafted that wonderful laugh over a plate of skillet fried chicken, drop biscuits, dandelion greens on the side. This is a sacred poem. Open your arms, turn your palms up, feel the spirit of greatness, and be redeemed.
Leaders of the civil rights movement.
That was Nicky Giovanni from earlier. Folks, speaking live right now at the podium is Ken Salazar. He's the Secretary of the Interior. The Department of the Interior, they are over, if you will, all of the National Mall. They're responsible for it. And so the foundation will no longer be responsible for the upkeep of the memorial. The Park Service will now be in control of that. And so that's why you hear Secretary Salazar speaking right now. In a few moments, we'll hear from President Barack Obama. Right now, he wanted to share with you a discussion between the president and Congressman John Lewis in terms of their relationship, because clearly you have a connection there between the old and the new.
America. This memorial today stands as a
You walked out of
testament to
that
Dr.
tunnel, sea of people, millions of folks in the mall in Washington. But the first person you spoke to, I took a photo of it and you hugged him, was
John Lewis.
Congressman John Lewis. What was it for you to look at him, the last surviving speaker from the I Have a Dream speech and the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, on that day, and you're about to get inaugurated?
No, it was powerful.
When I saw President Obama come down those steps, I was moved. And he came over to me and gave me a hug and said, John, I need your help. I need your prayers. And I said, Mr. President, you will have my help. You will have all of my prayers. And I cried a little.
What I said to him was that I'm here only because of you. And I absolutely believe that part of what made Inauguration Day a year ago powerful was seeing the culmination of the efforts of so many in the civil rights movement, black and white, to make a more perfect union. And it wasn't about me, it was about them and the doors that they had opened up for you and me and people of our generation.
After he took the oath and then started speaking, I looked past him. I saw the Lincoln Memorial, I saw the Washington Monument. I started thinking about Martin Luther King Jr., President Kennedy, President Johnson, the 4 little girls in Birmingham, the civil rights workers that was here, and I cried some more.
So to have John Lewis there, first person to see and essentially say, thank you, this is your moment, not just mine, that was really powerful.
I think the election of President Obama is a major down payment on the dream of Dr. King. It's not the fulfillment of that dream, but it's a major down payment.
Folks, we're now live. The Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, is now at the podium.
Day of remembrance for a man who was so great and so lovely. Good morning, Christine. How are you? I'm going to sing something that Dr. King often requested. And as a matter of fact, he requested it the morning that he was going to Billy Kyle's for dinner. May we have the track, please? Good morning, Dr. Lowry. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead, Lord, lead me on, and let me stand. Lord, sometimes I get tired.
Certainly one of the most iconic singers of our time, the Queen of Soul.
Absolutely. Only heard Mahalia Jackson do it better, and without an electronic tape as Aretha did. That was a very important part of the civil rights movement.
Music.
Music. Not only that, but meeting with the church and getting the congregations to pull together to unify what was needed to get things done.
On the stage right now is Harry Johnson, CEO of the MLK Foundation.
Earthquake. And then a lady named Irene paid us a visit. And it was indeed a dark day for me. But joy cometh in the morning. And what a glorious morning this is today. As I stand here and look across the transformed landscape, I see a wonderful example of what we can accomplish with this faith and with a stone of hope. We come together today to honor and celebrate the ideals of an humble man who understood that all humanity is linked together. And we come together to dedicate the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, our memorial, the world's memorial. Many of you seated here throughout this day and throughout this country have contributed years of your time, talent, and money to help us build the memorial we dedicate today. It has been both humbling and uplifting for me to be a part of this magnificent undertaking. Our hope is that through this memorial, Dr. King's legacy will continue to touch those who walked with him, those inspired by him, and future generations who will get to know him. On behalf of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation, I want to thank everyone for doing so much, so long, to help us arrive at this triumphant day in history. Once more, I also thank you to my family and to the staff of the MLK Memorial, a small group of folks that have worked tirelessly to make Dr. King's dream a reality right here on our National Mall. And so, it is indeed with great pleasure and an honor that I have to introduce to you the President of the United States, President Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please be seated. An earthquake and a hurricane may have delayed this day, but this is a day that would not be denied. For this day, we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s return to the National Mall. In this place, he will stand for all time among monuments to those who fathered this nation and those who defended it. A black preacher, no official rank or title, who somehow gave voice to our deepest dreams and our most lasting ideals. A man who stirred our conscience and thereby helped make our union more perfect. Now, Dr. King would be the first to remind us that this memorial is not for him alone. The movement of which he was a part depended on an entire generation of leaders. Many are here today, and for their service and their sacrifice, we owe them our everlasting gratitude. This is a monument to your collective achievement. Some giants of the civil rights movement, like Rosa Parks and Dorothy Height, Benjamin Hooks, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, they've been taken from us these past few years. This monument attests to their strength and their courage. And while we miss them dearly, we know they rest in a better place. And finally, there are the multitudes of men and women whose names never appear in the history books. Those who marched and those who sang, those who sat in and those who stood firm, those who organized and those who mobilized, all those men and women who through countless acts of quiet heroism helped bring about changes few thought were even possible. By the thousands, said Dr. King, faceless, anonymous, relentless young people, black and white, have taken our whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. To those men and women, to those foot soldiers for justice, know that this monument is yours as well. Nearly half a century has passed since that historic March on Washington, a day when thousands upon thousands gathered for jobs and for freedom. That is what our school children remember best when they think of Dr. King. His booming voice across this mall, calling on America to make freedom a reality for all of God's children. Prophesizing of a day when the jangling discord of our nation would be transformed into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. It is right that we honor that march, that we lift up Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, for without that shining moment, without Dr. King's glorious words, we might not have had the courage to come as far as we have. Because of that hopeful vision, because of Dr. King's moral imagination, barricades began to fall and bigotry began to fade. New doors of opportunity swung open for an entire generation. Yes, laws changed, but hearts and minds changed as well. Look at the faces here around you, and you see an America that is more fair and more free and more just than the one Dr. King addressed that day. We are right to savor that slow but certain progress. Progress that's expressed itself in a million ways, large and small, across this nation every single day, as people of all colors and creeds live together and work together and fight alongside one another and learn together and build together and love one another. So it is right for us to celebrate today Dr. King's dream and his vision of unity. And yet, it is also important on this day to remind ourselves that such progress did not come easily. That Dr. King's faith was hard-won, that it sprung out of a harsh reality and some bitter disappointments. It is right for us to celebrate Dr. King's marvelous oratory, but it is worth remembering that progress did not come from words alone. Progress was hard. Progress was purchased through enduring the smack of billy clubs and the blast of fire hoses. It was bought with days in jail cells and nights of bomb threats. For every victory during the height of the civil rights movement, there were setbacks and there were defeats. We forget now, but during his life, Dr. King wasn't always considered a unifying figure. Even after rising to prominence, even after winning the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King was vilified by many, denounced as a rabble-rouser and an agitator, a communist, and a radical. He was even attacked by his own people, by those he felt he was going too fast or those who felt he was going too slow, by those who felt he shouldn't meddle in issues like the Vietnam War or the rights of union workers. We know from his own testimony the doubts and the pain this caused him, and that the controversy that would swirl around his actions would last until the fateful day he died. I raise all this because nearly 50 years after the March on Washington, our work, Dr. King's work, is not yet complete. We gather here at a moment of great challenge and great change. In the first decade of this new century, we have been tested by war and by tragedy, by an economic crisis and its aftermath that has left millions out of work and poverty on the rise and millions more just struggling to get by. Indeed, even before this crisis struck, we had endured a decade of rising inequality and stagnant wages. In too many troubled neighborhoods across the country, the conditions of our poorest citizens appear little changed from what existed 50 years ago. Neighborhoods with underfunded schools and broken down slums, inadequate health care, constant violence, neighborhoods in which too many young people grow up with little hope and few prospects for the future. Our work is not done. And so on this day, in which we celebrate a man and a movement that did so much for this country, let us draw strength from those earlier struggles. First and foremost, let us remember that change has never been quick. Change has never been simple or without controversy. Change depends on persistence. Change requires determination. It took a full decade before the moral guidance of Brown versus Board of Education was translated into the enforcement measures of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, but those 10 long years did not lead Dr. King to give up. He kept on pushing. He kept on speaking. He kept on marching until change finally came. And then when even after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act passed, African Americans still found themselves trapped in pockets of poverty across the country. Dr. King didn't say those laws were a failure. He didn't say this is too hard. He didn't say let's settle for what we got and go home. Instead, he said, let's take those victories and broaden our mission to achieve not just civil and political equality, but also economic justice. Let's fight for a living wage and better schools and jobs for all who are willing to work. In other words, when met with hardship, when confronting disappointment, Dr. King refused to accept what he called the isness of today. He kept pushing towards the oughtness of tomorrow. And so as we think about all the work that we must do, rebuilding an economy that can compete on a global stage, fixing our schools so that every child, not just some, but every child gets a world-class education, and making sure that our healthcare system is affordable and accessible to all, and that our economic system is one in which everybody gets a fair shake and everybody does their fair share. Let us not be trapped by what is. We can't be discouraged by what is. We've got to keep pushing for what ought to be. The America we ought to leave to our children, mindful that the hardships we face are nothing compared to those Dr. King and his fellow marchers faced 50 years ago, and that if we maintain our faith in ourselves and in the possibilities of this nation, there is no challenge we cannot surmount. Just as we draw strength from Dr. King's struggles, so must we draw inspiration from his constant insistence on the oneness of man. The belief in his words that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. It was that insistence, rooted in his Christian faith, that led him to tell a group of angry young protesters, "I love you as I love my own children," even as one threw a rock that glanced off his neck. It was that insistence, that belief that God resides in each of us, from the high to the low, in the oppressor and the oppressed, that convinced him that people and systems could change. It fortified his belief in nonviolence. It permitted him to place his faith in a government that had fallen short of its ideals. It led him to see his charge not only as freeing Black America from the shackles of discrimination, but also freeing many Americans from their own prejudices, and freeing Americans of every color from the depredations of poverty. And so at this moment, when our politics appear so sharply polarized, and faith in our institutions so greatly diminished, we need more than ever to take heed of Dr. King's teachings. He calls on us to stand in the other person's shoes, to see through their eyes, to understand their pain. He tells us that we have a duty to fight against poverty even if we are well off, to care about the child in the decrepit school even if our own children are doing fine, to show compassion toward the immigrant family with the knowledge that most of us are only a few generations removed from similar hardships. To say that we are bound together as one people and must constantly strive to see ourselves in one another is not to argue for a false unity that papers over our differences and ratifies an unjust status quo. As was true 50 years ago, as has been true throughout human history, those with power and privilege will often decry any call for change as divisive. They'll say any challenge to the existing arrangements are unwise and destabilizing. Dr. King understood that peace without justice was no peace at all. That aligning our reality with our ideals often requires the speaking of uncomfortable truths and the creative tension of nonviolent protest. But he also understood that to bring about true and lasting change, there must be the possibility of reconciliation. That any social movement has to channel this tension through the spirit of love and mutuality. If he were alive today, I believe he would remind us that the unemployed worker can rightly challenge the excesses of Wall Street without demonizing all who work there. That the businessman can enter tough negotiations with his company's union without vilifying the right to collectively bargain. He would want us to know we can argue fiercely about the proper size and role of government without questioning each other's love for this country, with the knowledge that in this democracy, government is no distant object, but is rather an expression of our common commitments to one another. He would call on us to assume the best in each other rather than the worst, and challenge one another in ways that ultimately heal rather than wound. In the end, that's what I hope my daughters take away from this monument. I want them to come away from here with a faith in what they can accomplish when they are determined and working for a righteous cause. I want them to come away from here with a faith in other people and a faith in a benevolent God. This sculpture, massive and iconic as it is, will remind them of Dr. King's strength, but to see him only as larger than life would do a disservice to what he taught us about ourselves. He would want them to know that he had setbacks, because they will have setbacks. He would want them to know that he had doubts, because they will have doubts. He would want them to know that he was flawed, because all of us have flaws. It is precisely because Dr. King was a man of flesh and blood and not a figure of stone that he inspires us so. His life, his story tells us that change can come if you don't give up. He would not give up no matter how long it took, because in the smallest hamlets and the darkest slums, he had witnessed the highest reaches of the human spirit. Because in those moments when the struggle seemed most hopeless, he had seen men and women and children conquer their fear. Because he had seen hills and mountains made low, and rough places made plain, and the crooked places made straight, and God make a way out of no way. That is why we honor this man, because he had faith in us. And that is why he belongs on this mall, because he saw what we might become. That is why Dr. King was so quintessentially American, because for all the hardships we've endured, for all our sometimes tragic history, ours is a story of optimism and achievement and constant striving that is unique upon this earth. And that is why the rest of the world still looks to us to lead. This is a country where ordinary people find in their hearts the courage to do extraordinary things. The courage to stand up in the face of the fiercest resistance and despair and say, this is wrong and this is right. We will not settle for what the cynics tell us we have to accept, and we will reach again and again, no matter the odds, for what we know is possible. That is the conviction we must carry now in our hearts. As tough as times may be, I know we will overcome. I know there are better days ahead. I know this because of the man towering over us. I know this because all he and his generation endured. We are here today in a country that dedicated a monument to that legacy. And so with our eyes on the horizon and our faith squarely placed in one another, let us keep striving. Let us keep struggling. Let us keep climbing toward that promised land of a nation and a world that is more fair and more just and more equal for every single child of God. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
President Barack Obama speaking in front of the Stone of Hope. Of course, that is the monument to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Folks, your thoughts about the speech? Cynthia?
Well, I thought that this time he managed to much more tactfully express this notion that we keep going even when we're disappointed. I think that's what he meant to say at the Congressional Black Caucus dinner, and this time he did it in a way I don't think will anger people.
1 second, and then we're going to get to Karen and Joe in a moment. What's happening right now is President Obama, Vice President Biden, Jill Biden, the First Lady Harry Johnson, Secretary Ken Salazar, they are arms linked, singing "We Shall Overcome." So let's listen in. certainly a moving and inspirational rendition, We Shall Overcome. And Karen, when I think about that song, and I also think about what the president talked about, dealing with economic inequality.
Absolutely, and think about just the history of this moment. I mean, the weight of the history of this moment. The first black president honoring a monument to Martin Luther King.
And of course, who's speaking right now is Stevie Wonder, the man who was instrumental in making the holiday a reality. Here's Stevie Wonder.
Song that I imagine us being in this dream, being at a march. We were marching to make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. I knew then, I touched the dream, I saw it, as I did with here today, the monument. So congratulations, America, congratulations, the world. I can't believe it, but yes, I can.
Very interesting. During the celebrations, week of August 28th, Stevie Wonder talked about what happened. Harry Johnson got one of the risers that allowed Stevie Wonder to get on that and literally touch the face of Dr. King in the monument. And Stevie Wonder gave $10,000 to the foundation to have that cherry picker here for any other folks who are blind who wants to touch the face of King to do so.
And yesterday, while we were pulling everything together for TV1, I saw it in use. It was his sister who went up and touched it, and it's amazing gesture on his part.
Let's hear Stevie sing birthday song, Dr. King.
Someone who died for good.
Truly, truly amazing, Stevie Wonder. And I talked about, he was very emotional, touching the Monument of King.
Well, one of the things that I'm remembering is how many actors, musicians, well-known celebrities were active participants in the movement.
I was to say, if you think about it, I can't think of a time when somebody, to your point, said, let's make sure everyone can experience this monument in this way. I mean, that in of itself is progress in this country.
And remember, Stevie Wonder was little Stevie Wonder at the age of 14 years old. So when some candidates talk about the movement passed them by because they were in high school, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Something is about to come up, folks, that is amazing. You are going to see, for many of you, the first time, the I Have a Dream speech in its entirety. It is very rare that the King family has allowed that speech to be shown on national television. Here we go.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. "50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have all also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. Satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
To hear the full speech, it says a lot.
Today is all about echoes. Come full circle since
The weight of this moment, this gathering of people that we saw today on the stage, whom we may not get the chance to see together again, and to re-experience that speech and think about where we are now and where we need to go.
Well, Karen mentioned economic inequality earlier. One of the things that I heard over and over in the speeches today was economic injustice, which some would argue economic inequality has grown even worse since King's death. And we all remember that Dr. King was embarking on the Poor People's Crusade. Economic justice was going to be his next big crusade. So I think that that's something for us all to bear in mind at this moment in American history.
Joe, final thoughts?
Well, my final thought is really to thank TV One. And you know, something Diane Carroll said, you go from being on a show to owning the network. And I have been very fortunate to work with people like you. You know, this is like old home week, except we just don't have your green room food here. but the reality is that we've seen this network has brought to you Denver, Colorado, where a black man was nominated, brought to us Grant Park, where he was elected, and brought to you the inauguration where he was actually sworn in, and then to finally be here to something that in my lifetime, and I think all our lifetime, we've never seen a memorial to an African American to say to all people, that we really love this country. No matter what it does to
President
us.
Obama said MLK was quintessentially an American.
We really do love this country, even though it hasn't always been the best for us. We make it a more perfect nation.
Absolutely. All right, folks, now it's time for my final thoughts. We are celebrating Dr. King. We are celebrating who he was, but not his name. We're celebrating actually what he did. Andrew Young said that when he was elected president of the Montgomery Improvement Association, he wasn't even in the room when it took place. We have a generation of people today who continue to say, when will the next generation get out of the way? When will they hand us the baton? But that generation did not ask anyone to hand them the baton. They actually took the baton. Dorothy Cott, Ella Baker, Constance Baker Motley, also Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, Dr. King, Hosea Williams, John Lewis, Farmer, all the leaders of SNCC, SCLC, NAACP, Urban League. What they did not do is sit on the sidelines and complain about the state of America. They chose to use their voices and use their feet to change America. And so here we are celebrating the end result of all of that work. But the question for everybody watching is, Now what are you prepared to do? Are you willing to sit there and watch? Dr. King talked about police brutality. See what's happening when it comes to education of our children, when it comes to HIV/AIDS, when it comes to sexism. Are you willing to be silent, or are you willing to be in the game? And so this is a celebration of his life. It's a celebration of the civil rights movement. But what it should be is a call to action. A call for you in whatever lane that you're in to actually get in the car and drive down that lane. If we continue to complain about where America is and do nothing to change it, then we're just like the very people who tried to oppress black folks for more than 400 years. And so after the day is concluded, when you wake up tomorrow, you should say, I should have more pep in my step. I should have more of an action, more of a mindset where I'm not just tweeting on Facebook, but I'm going to be about changing the condition of our community. A strong America requires strong states. Strong states need strong cities. Strong cities need strong neighborhoods. Strong neighborhoods need strong blocks. Strong blocks need strong streets. Strong streets need strong houses. And that means somebody in that house must say, this is how we will operate from now on. That is your challenge. That is my challenge. That is our challenge. Now it's time for us to put the hard hats on, to put our boots on, and get to work. We can change America if we change ourselves. We want to thank everyone for watching our broadcast here, all of the crew for TV1, for a remarkable day. It has been absolutely fascinating. You can see more of this on TV1online.com. That is it for our special TV online coverage of the dedication of Martin Luther King's National Memorial. I certainly hope you enjoyed it here for this historic event. And be sure to tune in for Washington Watch at its regular time next week, Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern on TV1. Certainly enjoy the rest of your day and have a blessed week.
Let us stand together.
Thank you, Mama, for your sacrifice. And we, as your children, are glad that we were able to share our parents with the world.
This one man, not only freed a people, but he liberated a nation.
This is a marker for the fight for justice today and a projection for the fight for justice in the future.
Dr. King's glorious words, we might not have had the courage to come as far as we have. Because of that hopeful vision, because of Dr. King's moral imagination, barricades began to fall and bigotry began to fade. New doors of opportunity swung open for an entire generation. Yes, laws changed, but hearts and minds changed as well. Look at the faces here around you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.